So, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming along to this evening. And I'd love to welcome again Alistair Gould, who's here to talk to us about transformative adaptation at Furnace Brook in Sussex. So this is one of a series of Zoom calls that we're hosting with different people who did the breakout sessions at the Edge reunion in July, which you'll remember. And because people couldn't get a chance to go to everyone that they wanted to, this is a chance to repeat it. And I'm also recording it, as you'll see, so people can have a chance to watch it later if they can't be here live. So welcome, Alistair.
Thank you.
There will be a chance later to ask Alistair questions. I've got a couple, so be thinking of questions as we go through. Yeah, and we'll have a chance to do that at the end. Very good. So, Alistair, over to you, and let me know when you want me to bring the slide deck up.
Thank you. Well, I think if you can bring the slide deck up now, and thank you, because I don't seem to be able to press the buttons this end, so thank you for doing that task as well. I've been drawn in my life to activities and work, if you like, around co-creating naturally inspiring places and spaces. Sort of where I tend to always sort of be active, and those spaces being in nature or inspired by nature, and where they are hopefully places of coherence and calm. So one of those spaces, or the spaces, is where I'm based and working principally from at the moment, is down here in East Sussex at Furnace Brook. And I have changed the theme to include not only transformative adaptation, but ecosystem restoration, because actually they're two halves of the same fabric, if you like. So what I thought we'd do is actually start with a video. So if you want to just click onto the next slide, Kim. And this was from an event we held here 2 years ago, so 2 years ago, with Rupert Reed. And this is a short section of an excellent video, which I recommend you watch at some future date. But if you want to start at that point I mentioned there, Kim, which is about 2 minutes in, then that hopefully should become clear up there.
Food security, water and biodiversity.
Oh, if you can hear the sound.
Thank you, Gonzalo. That was fabulous. And in response, really, what we are doing here at Furnace Brook is to respond to that call to arms, and where we're working to create an arts and ecology hub here, applying permaculture principles to the management of the land, some 20 acres here, and linking up with other projects that I and colleagues have been working on over the last 2 decades in Kent and elsewhere. So we're delighted to join and be part of this ecosystem restoration initiative. We're part of a sort of collaborative framework here, in particular under the title of the Rural Transition Alliance Programme, and you'll hear more about that from Brian Spooner, one of the speakers, later on. A quote from somebody you may have heard from Churchill back in 1938, which is equally applicable to the times we live in now. The area of procrastination, of half measures, of soothing and baffling expedients, of delays is coming to a close. It is in its place, we are entering a period of consequences.
Thank you so much, Alistair and Gonzalo. And so I can't think of anyone better to follow up that introduction than Professor Rupert Reed, who has a fantastic title for his section. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but I'll give it a go. Transformative Adaptation as a Mind Bomb, How Building Community Resilience Can Restore Our Ecosystems and Restore Our Mental Ecosystems too.
Thanks for that kind introduction. And it's great to be here at this wonderful place. Now, what if I were to say to you, it's not too late. There's still hope. There's still time. It's 5 minutes to midnight, but the clock hasn't run out yet. We can still solve everything. We can solve climate change. We can solve the biodiversity crisis. We can solve everything. Everything's going to be fine. Even if we don't sort things out in the next decade or so, there'll be some magic tech that will come along in 2050 and 2060, sort it out for us. It's 5 minutes to midnight. It's not too late. Would you believe me? Would you find that message convincing? But what if I were to try this instead? What if I were to say to you, it's too late. It's over. It's the end times. We're doomed. We're bound to collapse. There's really nothing we can do. We've left it far too late. Excuse me, to the young people in the audience. Would you believe me? Well, what if I were to say to you, there are some things that it's too late for, and other things it's not too late for. It's not 5 minutes to midnight, but that doesn't mean that we're doomed. What if I were to say to you, it's kind of 5 minutes past midnight. Yeah, we're in the age of consequences. There are some things it's too late for. It's too late now to have a serene, smooth transition. If there was ever going to be a possibility of that, we would have had to have started much more seriously 40, 50 years ago. It's too late, tragically, to stay below 1.5 degrees, to stay in the safe zone climatically. Because if we were going to do that, then what the IPCC says, and I'm an expert reviewer for the IPCC, what they've said in the latest report is, we need to make deep and immediate cuts in global CO2 emissions. So we need to make those cuts worldwide if we are to stay below 1.5 degrees. And they clarified in answer to questions that by immediate, they meant this year. What if I were to say to you, there are some things it's too late for, and we are in the age of consequences, but there are other things it's not too late for. We can still massively soften our landing. We can gradually start to stop the damage that we're doing and start to restore it. We can become better adapted to the damaged world that we've created, and we can gradually reduce the damage and then start to reverse it. What if I were to say to you, that's how it is. It's 5 past midnight, but it's only 5 past midnight. Would you believe me?
Thank you very much. It was thanks to Rupert when he came, I think the year before that, and visited us for the first time, that he pointed out to me that some of the work that we've been endeavoring to do over a few years previous and since does fall under the description of transformative adaptation. And I know it's a theme which obviously Rupert's very eloquent about and close to his heart in the work he's now doing within the Climate Majority Project. So hopefully we're demonstrating in action elements of transformative adaptation. Just move on to the next slide. But starting with a space where we can restore, as also Rupert eloquently put, restoring not only our ecosystems, but our mental ecosystems too. And so we are lucky to be in this beautiful spot in the High Weald of East Sussex, which is the most of the protected landscapes in the UK. It's the most wooded of all of them. And we have this wonderful 6-acre lake in the middle of our land here, and I'll talk a little bit about aquatic ecosystem restoration later on. If next slide, please, Kim. And then there are a lot of activities we're undertaking here and have been following a non-critical path, as I like to call it, rather than creating deadlines for ourselves. But where the themes have emerged strongly around restoring soils, and a subset of that is some very interesting research in the production and application of biochar. I'm happy to talk about that maybe later on in if I've got any questions around that, as well as in aspects of food growing and other aspects around transformative adaptation through energy and water and so on. Next one, please, Kim. And within all that, we're working in a broadly artistic realm, and there are one or two, if you like, specific art pieces, but I think artistic endeavor, i.e. with the led by definition largely by the right brain, is key to a lot of what's emerging and has been emerging here over the last now 10 years. So the interface with the work we're doing with the environment is with an eye on beauty. And next slide, please. And then over the next year, well, there's plans already underway through partnerships for expansion. So the green boundaried area there, that is Furnace Brook. To your right, to your west, that's what that area, that side is a meadow which we've now had under our wing, thanks to generosity of a neighbouring landowner, which is grazing land for ponies at the moment, but where we will be, we're in the process of establishing some demonstration agroecological areas, and I'll come back onto that later. And then on the left-hand side is a much larger space, which we're in the process with others of becoming custodians of, and I'll speak a bit more about that later on. Next slide, please. And there's a couple of aerial shots, left-hand side of there obviously being the lake, and then the right-hand side being that farm next door, looking back towards the lake. And the hills in the distance, those are the South Downs. The other side of that is the Beachy Head and Seven Sisters, if you like, to give you some context. We're about 11, 12 miles from Eastbourne. Next slide. So a inspirational figure in my life over the last 6, 7 years, those of you here may know him, is the magnificent John Liu. And over the last year, 18 months, we've been very fortunate in having his generosity in giving his time in guiding us in a lot of the work we're now starting to develop. And he came and visited us for a week about 3 months ago now. And I'll leave him to, if you want to, Kim, just run that very short video.
We know the result of ignorance and greed in human behavior and in human society. We're not yet fully aware of the result of knowledge, consciousness, and generosity. So that's the moment in history where we are. It's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. That's a huge, huge understanding. We can choose consciousness and generosity. And if we do that, we are on the flourishing path.
So that is actually a trailer for a planned 26-part TV series that John is hoping to put together, or planning to put together. I know he was in Hollywood about 2 weeks ago, so hopefully he's found the funding for that. And there are, and I think if Kim, you share after this connections to one or two of his great videos, that's a very short snippet, but safe to say that John's been working in this field, from transitioning from a journalist filmmaker to filmmaker and ecologist after having witnessed profound ecosystem restoration in the Loess Plateau in central China, an area roughly, I think, the size of Belgium, might be even bigger. This is back in the 1990s, and as that snippet in that video shows, large-scale ecosystems can be stored on a large scale, and that, you know, we can do that. And surely that is the calling of all of us right now, to be able to do that, because that is addressing, well, obviously the restoration of nature and reversing biodiversity loss. It's not saying it's simple, but it can be done, and actually can have a very positive effect on reducing the harmful effects of climate and so on. But so there's reasons for hope, real hope without hopium, with some of the work he's been doing. So next slide, please, Kim. So as I mentioned, John has inspirationally shared with us his vision, and we've been working together on a flourishing path emerging here from, not just from here in Sussex, but other locations in Kent and London and so on. So this is work in progress, this tree or organogram. And within those themes, you'll see on the highlighted section there, I won't go through them all, but that does mention the Flourishing Path documentary program. So that's the trailer you just saw is for that series. And then work we're doing or undertaking, plan to undertake at Furnace Brook with the expanded area I showed you earlier, includes wildflower meadow restoration, and also in particular from the mother tree, which is a very simple but profound concept, which is in any wooded or even partially wooded area, and forests in particular, there are the mother trees, which are the hardy ones, and they, like all trees, will have their seeds are distributed on the ground, and then underneath those mother trees will become seedlings, will arise male seedlings, and these would never stand a chance of growing to maturity by the nature of them being under the tree, or very small percentage of them. So the principle of carefully taking these saplings out, digging them out, and then planting them, which is what we will be doing from late autumn this year, in pots with our own compost and biochar, complete with the mycorrhizal mushroom concoction, then these trees, saplings, could go elsewhere to other places in Sussex or London or whatever, where they stand obviously a much greater chance of growing to maturity and actually help to keep the genetic lines of ancient trees intact. And this is a simple activity that you can get children involved in, and mass participation. So that's just one inspirational concept which we're looking to work with, guided by John. And next slide, please. And actually, let's move on to the next one, please. So it's just emphasizing ecosystem restoration on the right-hand side. So just coming back to the plans here, Furnace Brook, then, as I mentioned earlier, we're adopting various agroforestry principles and looking at elements of rewilding within the land you see in front of you there. A strong emphasis on soil, as I said earlier, and in terms of the rewilding, we're still shaping conceptually what is the best for the land there, and drawing inspiration and wisdom from other places like NEP and so on, clearly, and reaching out to various other organisations to help us with that. And this area of High Weald is, well, like many areas of England, I think we've got 97% less wildflower meadows that we had before World War II. So there's the opportunity to restoring those. And one of the concepts at the moment we're working with, under the guidance of our team member Will, who's been exploring this, and we're very fortunate to have him here, in that he lived and foraged on this immediate landscape for the last 40 years. So such a valuable member to have part of our team. but looking at maybe bringing some mob grazing through wild horses, and he mentioned that in principle would then the scraping of where they canter around and so on, those scrapings would be perfect places to spread some wildflower seeds and so on. So we're still looking at the various directions of travel here, but that has some real attraction to us. And then we're looking at wetlands opportunities, again, in terms of restoring ecosystems across the planet, where we can make the most change for biodiversity enhancement is around wetlands and aquatic restoration, and I'll come onto that later. So yeah, Kim, thanks. Next one. So that's covered that right-hand side there, and hopefully you can see why there's a balance there between the great work of ecosystem restoration and then the important work of transformative adaptation, which would be 10 times harder were we not also looking at restoring the ecosystem. And actually, given the right wisdom and guide from people like John, then the restoration of ecosystems can be joyful, and the transformative adaptation models, which we need to consider in communities, much easier, as I said. So next slide, please. And so we're taking, as I said, various actions here around building resilience, around food growing, and also activities like food fermentation, so keeping foods for longer and so on, and working. And again, this is another influence of dear Rupert, as he came up with the term of the throughtopian rather than utopian and dystopian as
Hello, Alistair?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, good. Fine. Oh, it says my internet. No. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Bit of a problem with the internet here, but okay. So thanks to, again, Rupert's terminology of throughopia, then that's where those on this call and others linked to the Edge and so on can come in with the throughtopian stories that they want to share with us and we want to share with them and so on. And our role here at Furnace Brook is principally about hosting, facilitating, and not, there's only so much we can do. We're just trying to provide a space for others to come in and share this journey with their inspiration and their initiatives. And if we just go on to the next slide, this shows you the inside of the barn, which we have restored. And you will see on that, from that previous image, that artwork is actually a physical artwork, which through serendipity of life and connections, we became custodians of here, and is on that wall there writ large. And it was actually a piece commissioned by 26 health professionals for the XR Big One last year, and then it was looking to find a home, and the home is now at Furnace Brook. So that provides a lovely visual to guide through Utopian Futures. And you'll see the space that we have there is very much a community space. And to your left, which you won't see, are various artifacts linked to the last time when we collectively came together in a strong way as communities for a different call, which was during World War II. And so that model of resilience, then the metaphor of those times can be stretched a bit far, but it's not a bad one to have. And so within the barn there, we have the historical artifacts from those times, and then working with Jen Newell, the modeling of how we can build resilience as communities now. So that's a work in progress. If we just go on to the next slide, which is the final slide, unfortunately, Jen Newell couldn't be with us today, and it's been my delight to work with Jen over this last year, just over a year now, since we both met at an Edge retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she has taken on, within her breadth of great heart and intellectual capacity, a number of threads, including creating pieces like part of what you're seeing here and articulating things. And the role that fits very much is one of the local narrator. And also where she is shaping resilience retreats from here. So I'll leave her to explain that at another Zoom call. But within that role she has as local narrator, I'll just come back to a fairly recent incident that's affected us here, and we're still assimilating where we go from it in a holistic and positive manner, is that 2.5 months ago, a toxic stream that entered the top of the lake from upstream, from farmland, where the farmer was a combination of being ignorant and evidence some greed, if you like. So that toxic waste entered the stream, entered the lake, and downstream as well, and resulted in wiping out pretty much the entire aquatic ecosystem. So not just the fish, and there were some fine, 4-foot long eels, very rare, and freshwater mussels and so on. And we had a very emotional and tough a couple of weeks or more addressing that and taking on stock what on earth was happening. But at another level, this is, of course, a microcosm of the macrocosm. And with John's wise guidance, great support, then we're just trying to reshape this into a tragic opportunity, and the aim of restoring, obviously, this ecosystem, which the guidance I've had so far is that will be a 10-month, I wish it were, 10-year program, realistically. And so we're marking the sort of first step of that on the 24th of September, when we're hosting an event or an opportunity to work for people to come together, which is on World Rivers Day. And I'm hoping that we can garner community support around how we can look to restore the aquatic ecosystem. So I'll stop there, and over to Jim, yourself, and everyone here.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Alistair. It's so inspiring what you're doing. Thank you so much for sharing it. So the rest of us, be thinking of questions. I've got a tricky one to start with, Alistair, so I hope it doesn't challenge you too much. It's incredibly inspiring. Most of us live in cities and we haven't got access to land. How can we do transformative adaptation?
I was going to answer the question with ecosystem restoration. That's quite easy. I'll come on to that. In terms of our own transformative adaptation, I think it's really first and foremost about finding the others and reaching out for community. And there's so many good community initiatives, as we know here, I'm sure, in towns and cities. And actually, I would argue, on the whole, better. From my direct experience, I found it easier to find cohesive community initiatives within towns and cities rather than rural communities. And there's some fine exceptions. But when I was over in Kent, in a rural community there, I had an experience of huge hostility to things like this we were trying to do. So, yeah, it's about community, simply said, but
yeah. And I guess a lot of it is the inner, as you were saying, the mental transformative adaptation.
absolutely, yeah.
By the way, welcome, Wendy. Good to see you. Okay, so over to the rest of you. What do you want to know? What do you want to just say? What occurs to you as a result of the last half an hour? Yeah, just unmute yourself and go.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Really, really sad to hear about this impact of this toxic waste coming into the lake. I mean, those pictures are exquisite, and I can only imagine, knowing that space as you must, how it must feel to have lost all the life in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really sad to hear that. What is your, I'm wondering what the right phraseology would be, but how you've got some young people involved. How do you see the project in the next 20, 40, 60 years? And just as context for that question, two big ecosystem restoration projects that I am aware of in the last 10 years or so have been very badly impacted by older couples selling off the land to developers. That's been hugely restored, huge amounts of volunteer efforts gone into it. And all that work's been completely undone by the following owner. And I don't know if you've planned for something like that.
I haven't planned for something like, well, the land that we're in the process of collectively acquiring, how that transpires, we're still seeking out partners in terms of a realistic partnership for that. And the aim there is, and I've been discussing this with John Liu amongst others, is, I mean, within the bigger picture, we need a different model of how we are custodians of the land without the ownership piece being preeminent, but that's the reality we're working in. And so the aim is certainly there within the framework that John Liu has inspirationally established through ecosystem restoration communities across the planet, through funding partners to find a way in which the legacy of the space is not, it's not just about our space, it needs to be for the next generations, as we know. In terms of what that looks like, in terms of legal structures, it's still to emerge precisely what that is. I haven't got a quick fire answer on that. What I have been looking at, where I've shaped with colleagues, the acquisition of the land next door, is as describing it as an ecosystem restoration land purchase initiative, which by definition we can attract high net worth individuals, not just on this, but other models, and other colleagues I'm working with in this general space are working with this same challenge and dilemma, but where we can attract, well, either full philanthropic funding or semi-investment funding, but where there is a shared aspiration for this needs to be for future generations. So work in progress is all I can say.
Thank you, Wendy. Thanks, Alistair.
I should say also, in terms of that tree organogram, which referenced, that you probably couldn't see it, it's quite there, but various organizations at the foot of that metaphorical tree, where we're working together or shaping the partnerships together of how we can make these things occur, and where this emergent partnership will be including spaces in Kent and London, and that will be swiftly turbocharged if a current lottery bid. We're working with local 3VA, which is a local East Sussex-based charity to help with community cohesion. If that bid's successful under the Climate Action Fund for £1.5 million, if that is, then that will help speed things up, but we're not relying upon it.
Great. Kathy, you had your hand up.
So it's not actually a question, but I was at an amazing workshop this weekend just gone, and I met a lady called Carrie Court, and she's from sussexgreenliving.co.uk, and she works all around Horsham. And I didn't go into depth with the conversation, but or many conversations, but she has an amazing network of community activity, and she's recently even got a grant from a developer, would you believe, to work with them to, to look at how they can do a lot better in terms of the development in that area. And I didn't quite understand from your presentation, how much local community networking and that you have in place. But I would certainly suggest she's a woman to contact. She's just amazing.
Thank you. And I'm aware of her and that network, but I haven't, I know one of her colleagues, but thank you for emphasizing that. It's, what it's like. They're a bit further away from us. I just haven't made that connection yet, but absolutely and there's a lot of really good work happening in more West Sussex and East Sussex, but and there's the whole Will to Waves initiative, which NEP is at the heart of, and there's but we are very small, and I'm spread very thin, so that's just where things at. But really appreciate that, Kathy. So I have made a note on that. But on in terms of what you're talking there about funding, it's an inch. There's a sort of Wild West territory out there at the moment where there are opportunities, but there's a lot of questionable activities around. There's biodiversity net gain as a new element within the planning framework, which in principle is very good, and this came from the last government. But the devil is in the detail. But the principle, in simple terms, that any new housing development, unless very modest in size, has to demonstrate net gain in biodiversity, and usually that can never be achieved purely on that site of the development, and therefore there is money through that network that can be then attributed to initiatives such as ours. So we're aware of that, but I'm very cautious about being tied into a framework which is a demand, understandably, but you're committed to a 30-year time frame, which is, in terms of restoration, which is challenging. The irony is, at the moment, in terms of if hopefully we will get some compensation early days from what we've been hit with the pollution, but depending on how that turns out, we could get look at biodiversity net gain, and actually you get the most amount of money for aquatic ecosystem restoration. Not that I'm pleased this has happened anything, but there are those avenues which we can look at. But it's complex.
On the aquatic thing, you probably know all this, so do forgive me, but do you remember, it might have been, I'm sure it was last year, but it might have been the year before, time goes so fast. They had those horrendous fires in California in that village called Paradise.
Yeah.
And the heat was so intense that metals, really bad metals, melted. And I think I've got reference to it in one of my permaculture magazines, but they've started building like beaver dams, if you will, the equivalent of a beaver dam, and they're inoculating them with fungus, with mycorrhizal particular types of fungus, and it is working.
Right.
It is absorbing this metal runoff, and in somehow or other, it's not neutralized. Well, you know what I mean? It's reducing it. I don't think it's neutralizing it, but it's reducing it. Again, it's like you said, it's going to be a 10-year project or something.
Yeah.
But the notion of like having bulky dams like a beaver dam needs to be something worth exploring as well.
Thank you. Well, just 2 points on that. First of all, thank you for pointing that out. And I suspect So in terms of the ecosystem restoration camps and communities around the planet, which from a standing start, one in 2017, there are now about 80, and this all through John's inspiration, that there is one in Paradise. And I suspect, therefore, that group is probably working around that, or others working in that realm in that creative way. And that's, you know, and we are in formation, maybe of being another community. But whilst what we've hit with is pretty bad, it's nowhere near as bad as that, or indeed, I'm sure, the ecosystem restoration community in Somalia and other places like that. And you mentioned beavers, and in fact, we did look at the introduction of beavers here about 3 or 4 years ago. And one of the pieces that we might be looking at, and thankfully the regulated framework has been going slightly in the right direction since then, it might be that we, with other adjacent farmers, could look at that here. It's a very good location for it. And after what we've been hit with, then it's about time one response is to be a bit more radical. And actually, it's not that radical because it wouldn't be affecting arable land around here. But looking at those sort of opportunities, but connected with other local community, which you did ask at the beginning, actually. And the answer to that question is we are not particularly, well, we're not highly networked in our immediate locality. We're not actually in a village, though we're obviously the villages nearby and so on. And whilst we are connecting in a different way with communities in London, but that's a different story.
And finally, if I may, just I feel like
go for it.
Into, but I 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I did a permaculture design course, and there are a lot of young, much younger than me, people doing the same thing, and they're looking for experience. So, you know, there's a lot of people out there who have either done the course and could help do any design work, but a lot of people who would actually, if you can offer some sort like camping and toilets.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, thank you for arranging that. And I've done a PDC myself 15 years ago. Wonderful course, and subscribing to the Permaculture magazine from back in the 1990s. But it's such has been the recent journey here. We've lost 1 or 2 team members, including Dave, who I've worked with for the last 30-odd years in environmental education over in Kent, and he was our outdoor animator, and sadly younger than me, but he died of cancer last year. So we're very thin on the ground. It's just a stage we're at the moment. We are educator members of the Permaculture Association, and we're just at a stage at the moment where not just because of what's happened with the pollution, but just more generally, we're just at an interesting stage where we have very few team members at the moment. But I take that completely on board.
Would you like more unpaid volunteers?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. So,
group that is run by Aranya. You've probably heard of him.
I know of him. I've never met him, but I certainly know of him. Yeah.
Pretty much in the forefront of permaculture in the UK.
Yeah, I've got one of his books.
He does like 5 or 6 courses a year. So he has 60 odd people every year joining his database. And you know, I can give you details if you want, but he might be a good person to contact, and then you could what you're doing with him and see.
And that's part of that. That's great. So I made a note. Thank you. I've got Carrie and Aranya. Bless you for that. Both individuals I know of but never reached out to, so now I will. And what, as I was saying earlier on, what we can do here is host and facilitate. And whilst we have run an introduction to permaculture course here, I'd much rather we just offer up the land to people like Aranya to do all that. And we've got all the facilities for that. And we've got plenty of bespoke accommodation to make that reality. And indeed, which was part of the purpose of chatting here is to reach out to other folk who've been on edge retreats and open to any ideas, and that is really more second part, which Jen will speak to when she's well enough. But that's the intention.
Yeah. So it's the offer's open for
Absolutely.
edgers to come along and, you know, have spaces there and have you know, run retreats or be on retreats or that sort of thing there. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kathy. Who else?
Can I ask, Alistair, just a very high level summary, what sort of facilities have you got? How many people can you easily accommodate for a retreat? For example, a yoga meditation retreat, who people want to walk around in nature?
We are particularly focused, or I've always been, around health and well-being. And certainly we've got the main space where the big barn is there, and there's some accommodation adjacent to that, which is nearing completion, but there's some accommodation there. And then at Batsford Hollow, which is the off-grid retreat space, there are some bespoke shelters, about half a dozen, and then we've also got other tents, what do you call them? End of the round tents. Not yurts, but the other round one. Anyway, it doesn't. I can't remember their name now. It's gone out of my head. Not teepees even. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And so where we've been shaping the space there is envisaging it as ideally for a group of about 20, and we've got some great spaces for yoga and so on. The land works well, and there are very bespoke little areas within these areas as well.
Okay.
But say if you've got a group of 20 or 30 even, probably not more than that, then this is ideal for that. And if you like, our medium-term objective is to reach out to ideally one or two groups who are running such retreats, and also, importantly, with more money involved, people who are working in corporate training. And if we can secure them as the anchor users of our space and alignment with the vision here, then that makes a hell of a difference. We've done a lot of the hard work on the land itself, some very unusual shelters, which link into some of my other work I've been doing around over the world over the period of time in the past around sustainable buildings and so on. So yeah. And as you can see with the adjacent farm, and while shaping that expands that opportunity, but also is expanding, stretching us a bit in terms of capacity and bringing that on board with everything else we've been working on the last 10 years. But I trust the right people will come on board, and it'll work fine.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Wendy. Just giving you, Nikki, giving you, Sue, a chance to come in if you want to.
Yeah, I don't really have anything specific to say. I'm really interested to learn about it.
Great. Sue.
All I'd like to say to Nikki, we've got the barn is really superb space acoustically. So at some stage, it would be great to have you down here. Yeah,
it'd be a privilege. I'd love to. I've got just selfishly sort of trying to understand what's happened when I think about water. Where does it stop when you get an event like this? And I appreciate it's a lake rather than a river, but there will be places where the water goes. Did it impact on your woodland, and how far does it spread, this sort of problem?
Well, it is a lake within a river course, or stream at that stage. So upstream from the source of pollution, the stream entering the lake, all of that, all the life in that and what was a previous verdant woodland stream is killed off. And then downstream, certainly there have been some fish deaths, and certainly our next door neighbour downstreams, he picked out some dead freshwater mussels, which could be anything up to 80 years old, dead. So further downstream, I'm not sure. And because this has been such a growing thing, and we're working with the Environment Agency at the moment, working with 3 different Environment Agency departments, and I haven't really had the capacity to check myself downstream too much. What does seem to be the case, which is sort of logical, and from the aquatic consultant that's come along to help us start shaping the recovery plan, is the lake has taken the brunt of that pollution, and so downstream shouldn't be affected so much. I just hope that, I'm sure the Environment Agency and others are checking on things, given, amongst other things, a bit further downstream, the water is extracted for drinking water respawn. So I assume there's been appropriate tests done on that. But equally, we're still in the process. We still don't know precisely the nature of the toxic substance, and that, it turns out, I didn't even do chemistry O level, so I can't profess to have much knowledge in this area, but it's not that easy to find precisely what this is. But safe to say, this is not just farm effluent, slurry or whatever. There's something else there. And also we have, this will affect the base of the lake, where the silt there and so on, which we had previously, in a permaculture-led way, have been managing our silt, harvesting it, if you like, with a small digger we have here on a regular basis, and then collecting that. And then after a period of time, 6 months, then that is added to a mix of leaf mulch and horse manure and so on, and put on the land. We can't do that anymore because it's toxic. And there are other things we've still got to establish around the recovery, and it's why it'll take a long period of time. It's a bit like the microbiome is disappearing out of our stomach. You can't just bring in new fish or whatever. The whole thing is completely out of balance. So it'll take, as I said, anything up to apparently 10 years to get things back into balance and introduce appropriate fish and so on.
And sorry, I'm just trying to understand. Where does it go when you say I don't understand this at all.
Well,
so I'm just stabbing
no,
the dark. Does
fine.
it sink to the bottom? Does it dilute and wash away in the end? It's
I guess
fascinating.
I think certainly we're waiting on our test at the moment to see how much has sunk to the bottom, and certainly plenty of it has gone downstream, and nature does its stuff. And the planting, we of the last 12 years have planted assiduously around the margins to help maximum biodiverse lake, and a balanced lake anyway. So the plants have picked it up, and some of those have died, but most are still living and so on. So I'm sorry, I'm not the chemist to give the precise answer on that. But nature has healing properties, as we know, but there isn't at the moment any particular clear magic silver bullet to speed that process that I can find. It's a long haul.
Thank you. And if people were coming to lend a hand physically rather than doing a retreat or an event or something, what sort of things can they do to help?
I think with the aquatic side of things, then probably not the area that we will hopefully start to shape, and I'm hoping could be with the help of certainly individuals I know at Sussex University, that there could be some citizen science activities around water monitoring and so on, and analysis around that. But beyond that, then it really is more about the land and our existing work we're doing with soil, enhancement of soil through biochar, and indeed the rewilding activities as and when they come to full clarity next year, and then their assistance on some clear-cut areas around that and other sort of work around. We've got a lot of willow here, so sort of harvesting that, and indeed we do run occasional workshops on willow, living willow structures and stuff like that. So those are more workshops, but fun things one can get involved in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. So just as we come to the end here, Alistair, you've been doing this for decades, and it's clearly very close to your heart. What, it might sound like a dumb question, sort of going upstream, if you'll pardon the pun, what's so important about this work for you personally?
Simply, well, I'm just drawn to it. I guess since maybe experiences as a young child, just love being out in nature and seeing, connecting with the beauty of nature. And also knowing the challenging position we're in globally and within society and so on, that this I think is coming back to Rupert Reed, as he pithily puts it, along the lines, if your children or grandchildren speak to you in 20 years' time and say, well, when you knew, what did you do? And it's partly that. And my luck or misfortune was having a lengthy stay in or traveling in North America in 1979 and reading books like Limits to Growth and seeing stuff happening in a positive way, and recognizing the limit of entering overshoot as a piece and so on, that it seems right, we need to address this. It's rather important. So it just sort of stuck with me, not perfectly, but it's been the theme that's been there.
That's marvelous.
I also say I've got inspiration from my grandfather, Fred Cleary, on my mother's side, who had the nickname of Flowering Fred, and he was a modestly successful chart surveyor, and then persuaded my grandmother he could sort of semi-retire and then fulfill his passion of restoring old buildings. He made a lot of money on that, actually very sustainably when everybody else is knocking them down, and ploughed nearly all of that money into restoring and preserving green spaces in London and elsewhere. And that legacy of action and positivity stays with me today.
It's in the blood.
Yeah.
Kathy, you had something.
Would you mind, Alistair, giving me your email address? Because
yeah, of course.
In my PDC, there were 12 of us, and we've done what we call a perma blitz. You know, we've just gone in and done, like, planted orchards and I don't know what else. I don't know if that group of people would like to come and help, but I could talk to them and ask.
Lovely. Yeah, of course.
What would be your email address?
It's Alistair, Alistair, at furnacebrook.co.uk.
Brilliant. And I'll also, as I said, I'll talk to Aranya as well.
Lovely, thank you.
I do want to do, I mean, I'm trying to do something locally, but it's just not happening. You know, I would really like to try and help. So if I can be a little tiny cog in a big wheel, it would be okay.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kathy. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we've come to the end, and I've cocked up, Alistair, somehow with all of the sharing of the videos. The recording stopped.
Oh, right.
It's
Never mind.
It's not recorded, I'm afraid.
Right.
Which is a great shame. So
what you mean?
On mine, it says recording.
Does it?
Yeah.
It says this meeting is being recorded on mine.
Yeah.
Oh no, you're right. Oh, excellent. Okay, good. Ignore me.
Okay.
Fantastic. Well, I will share the recording around the edges.
Thank you.
You'll also go on our YouTube channel. And yeah, I'm very grateful to all of you for coming. I'm very grateful to you, Alistair, and not just for coming tonight, but for everything that you're doing.
Well, and if I may say, obviously, if we are able to make the link with Jen, which was the plan tonight, in a Zoom in due course, then that would be fabulous to see how it works out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll leave the ball in the two of you's court.
Fine.
Fix that up. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much love.
Yeah.
And we have
Okay.
another one in a couple of weeks of these. I can't remember which one it is, but I sent round the programme. So this is all of the things repeated that were at the reunion. So thank you so much. Lovely to see you all.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.